On the evening of March 31st, 1922, as darkness settled over the Bavarian countryside, an unspeakable horror unfolded at a remote farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. Hidden among dense woods and located roughly 70 kilometers north of Munich, the farm was isolated, even by rural standards. It was the kind of place where neighbors were distant, where nights were long and silent, and where secrets could go easily unnoticed. By the time anyone realized something had gone wrong, it was already far too late. Andreas Gruber, a stern and aging patriarch, lived on the farm with his wife, Gezelia, their widowed daughter, Victoria, and Victoria's two young children, 7-year-old Gezelia and 2-year-old Josef. On that fateful day, a new maid named Maria Baumgartner arrived to begin work. She would become the 6th victim. What happened that night would echo through history as one of the most disturbing and perplexing unsolved crimes in Germany. In the weeks leading up to the murders, something about Hinterkaifeck had begun to feel wrong. It started with small, unsettling details. The previous maid had abruptly quit her job, claiming she heard strange noises coming from the attic, footsteps, movements, sounds that could not be explained. She became convinced that the house was haunted and refused to stay another night. One day, Andreas Gruber discovered tracks in the snow leading from the nearby forest directly to the farm's machine room. What made them so disturbing was that there was no return footsteps. Whoever had approached the house had not left, at least not by the same path. Around the same time, Andreas found a newspaper from Munich lying on the property, though no one in the household subscribed to it. It was as if someone had been there, watching, waiting, leaving behind small traces of their presence. At night, the family reportedly heard footsteps in the attic. Andreas searched repeatedly, but found no one. Despite sharing these concerns with neighbors, he refused offers of help and never reported the incidents to authorities. There were other rumors too, whispers of tension within the household. Victoria, the daughter, had a troubled past, including a scandalous and criminal relationship with her father that had resulted in a conviction years earlier. Whether this dark history played any role in what happened next remains unknown, but it added another layer of unease to an already unsettling situation. On March 31st, Maria Baumgartner arrived at the farm that afternoon, escorted by her sister. She stepped into a household that seemed, at least on the surface, ordinary. By evening, she was alone with the family, unaware that she had just entered a place marked for death. That night, one by one, members of the Gruber family were lured into the barn. Whether it was a noise, a disturbance among the animals, or something more deliberate, investigators later believed the victims were drawn there individually, and in the darkness of the stable, they were attacked. The killer used a mattock, a heavy farming tool with a broad blade, to deliver fatal blows to the head. Andreas, Gezelia, Victoria, and young Gezelia were all struck down in the barn. Their bodies were later found stacked together in the straw, suggesting either an attempt to conceal them or a disturbing ritualistic act. But the violence did not end there. After the killings in the barn, the perpetrator entered the house. Inside, they found 2 remaining victims, little Josef asleep in his bassinet, and Maria Baumgartner in her bed. Both were killed with the same brutal method. 6 lives extinguished in a single night, and yet, the most chilling part of the story was still to come. In most crimes, the perpetrator flees the scene as quickly as possible. At Hinterkaifeck, the opposite happened. Evidence would later reveal that the killer remained on the farm for days, possibly as many as 3. During that time, they ate the family's food. They tended to the livestock, ensuring the animals were fed and cared for. Smoke was seen rising from the chimney, indicating that the fireplace or oven was being used. From the outside, nothing seemed amiss. The farm appeared to be functioning as usual. But inside, 6 bodies lay lifeless. This detail transformed the crime from brutal to deeply disturbing. It suggested a level of calm, control, and perhaps even familiarity with the property. Whoever had committed the murders was not in a hurry. They were comfortable enough to stay, comfortable enough to live among the dead. Days passed without alarm. On April 1st, traveling salesmen visited the farm but received no answer at the door. They noticed nothing overtly suspicious and eventually left. Meanwhile, small signs began to accumulate. Young Hazilia failed to appear at school. The family missed Sunday church services, an unusual occurrence in a devout rural community. Still, no one immediately investigated. It wasn't until April 4th that the truth came to light. Concerned neighbors, including Lorenz Schlittenbauer, went to the farm to check on the family. Upon entering the barn, they made the grim discovery: 4 bodies lying in the straw. Shortly afterward, the remaining 2 victims were found inside the house. The silence of Hinterkaifeck had finally been broken, but what it revealed only deepened the mystery. The investigation, led by Inspector Georg Reingruber from Munich, began under difficult circumstances. Almost immediately, the crime scene was compromised. Curious neighbors had already moved through the property, disturbing evidence. Some had even used the kitchen, preparing food in the very space where the killer had recently stood. Critical clues were lost before authorities could even properly examine the scene. Autopsies revealed the brutality of the murders. All victims had suffered fatal head injuries, consistent with blows from a mattock. Disturbingly, evidence suggested that young Hazilia had survived for several hours after the attack, lying injured in the straw before finally succumbing. In her agony, she had torn out clumps of her own hair. Investigators initially suspected robbery, but this theory quickly fell apart. A significant amount of money remained untouched within the house. Instead, the focus shifted to individuals connected to the family. Over the years, numerous suspects emerged, each with their own possible motive, but none could be definitively linked to the crime. Lorenz Schlittenbauer was among the first, a neighbor and a former lover of Victoria. He had a complicated relationship with the family. His behavior during the discovery of the bodies raised suspicion. He entered the house alone, seemingly unafraid, and may have disturbed key evidence. Some believed he had knowledge only the killer would possess. Another theory centered on Karl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, who had been declared dead during World War I. Because his body was never recovered, some speculated he might have returned and committed the murders. However, witnesses who had served with him claimed to have seen his body on the battlefield. Other suspects included local laborers, criminal brothers, and even itinerant killers. One particularly chilling theory suggested a man named Paul Mueller, believed by some to be a serial killer responsible for similar family murders in the United States, may have returned to Germany and committed the crime. Yet none of these theories could be proven. Adding to the mystery were reports of strange sightings. A farmer claimed to have seen 2 figures near the forest edge on the night of the murders. When they noticed him, they turned away, hiding their faces. The following night, another man passing the farm saw smoke rising from the chimney, evidence that someone was still inside. When he approached, a figure confronted him, shining a lantern directly into his eyes before he fled. Who was still there, and why? Even years later, odd incidents continued. In 1927, a stranger reportedly approached a local resident, asking questions about the murder, then claimed to be the killer before disappearing into the forest. Despite decades of investigation, no one was ever convicted of the Hinterkaifeck murders. The case was officially closed in 1955, though interrogations and inquiries continued sporadically for years afterward. The farm itself was demolished not long after the crime, as if to erase the horror from the landscape. In its place now stands a small memorial, a quiet reminder of what happened there. The story of Hinterkaifeck endures not just because of its brutality. but because of its silence, its lack of answers. It is a tale of isolation, fear, and the unknown. And somewhere, buried beneath the layers of time and speculation, the truth still waits, hidden in the shadows of a farm that no longer stands.